Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. As you can see, I'm now back in New Zealand, where I will be for the next week or so. Let's jump in. Today's video will be very much focused on US-China competition, and we begin by continuing our coverage of the ongoing US-China trade war 2.0. China has responded to US President Donald Trump's latest wave of tariffs with a strategic countermeasure, targeting select American companies and imposing moderate levies on US goods, suggesting an intent to retaliate while maintaining economic stability and leaving room for potential negotiations. Of course, regular viewers will know that China's economy is very vulnerable at the moment, with several systemic and structural issues which policymakers have been grappling with for years. In immediate response to US levies, China announced a 15% tariff on $5 billion worth of US energy imports, including coal and liquefied natural gas, while a 10% tariff was imposed on $9.5 billion worth of American agricultural equipment and crude oil. Notably, these measures appear to be designed to minimize damage to China's own economy while sending a message to Washington. Beyond tariffs, China took a more targeted approach by blacklisting major US firms, including PVH Corp, the parent company of Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and gene sequencing giant Illumina Inc. These actions signal Beijing's willingness to disrupt US businesses that have significant operations in China, reminding corporate America of the risks of escalating trade tensions. Additionally, China implemented export controls on critical minerals such as tungsten, a key component in defense and technology industries. With China supplying nearly 80% of the world's tungsten, this restriction could have far-reaching consequences for US manufacturing, particularly in aviation and defense sectors. Meanwhile, China has also revived antitrust investigations into major US technology companies, including Google and Nvidia, while considering a similar probe into Intel. The renewed scrutiny appears to be part of Beijing's broader strategy to use regulatory tools as leverage in trade negotiations with the United States. Google's antitrust investigation, which initially began in 2019, just before COVID, but was later shelved, has been reopened, focusing on the dominance of its Android operating system and its potential impact on Chinese smartphone makers such as Oppo and Xiaomi. The State Administration for Market Regulation gave no details about Google's alleged issues in its announcement of the investigation. Even though Google long ago pulled its web search business out of the PRC, its Android OS operating system has significant market share, and the company generates billions of dollars in revenue each year selling ads to PRC firms marketing outside of China. Meanwhile, Nvidia, the world's largest AI chipmaker, has found itself under investigation for alleged violations of previous commitments related to its acquisition of Mellanox Technologies. The UK-based Financial Times also reports that the regulators may now also open a formal probe into Intel. These moves reflect China's growing willingness to challenge the dominance of American technology firms while simultaneously protecting its own domestic companies from the effects of US export controls. However, regular viewers will also know that China has been trying to attract international investment and has been concerned with capital outflows as well as the diversification of supply chains away from China, known euphemistically as de-risking or decoupling. Going after technology firms essentially as a negotiating tactic risks undermining these efforts and hurting China's dynamism in the long run. Then there is the question of how effective these moves from Beijing are. Analysts like Larry Hu, chief of China economics at Macquarie Group Limited, argue that China is being restrained because it, quote, has more to lose, end quote, due to its huge trade imbalance with the United States, adding, quote, a full-blown tariff war is not in China's interest. Instead, China is likely to respond to tariffs mainly through domestic stimulus, end quote. Indeed, in a piece published today called Xi's Careful Reply to Trump Tariffs Shows China Has More to Lose, US-based Bloomberg economists argued, quote, the swift but calculated retaliation signaled that Beijing has learned a lesson from its first trade fight with Trump, when China retaliated with tariffs on par or close to what the US imposed. This time, Xi only put tariffs on $14 billion worth of American products, a slither of what Trump targeted. while taking other measures that showed off China's ability to inflict further pain on US companies if needed. End quote. Now, despite the retaliatory measures, market reactions remained relatively muted. The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index initially dipped, but later rebounded with a 3% gain on Tuesday, reflecting investor confidence that Beijing's response was measured rather than overly aggressive. The offshore yuan, the Chinese currency, also stabilized after an initial dip, though we note that in both cases these are sitting at historic lows, and so we take note of the base effect. The executive order from the White House announcing the US tariffs contained the clause, quote, "Should the PRC retaliate against the United States in response to this action through import duties on United States exports to the PRC or similar measures, the President may increase or expand in scope the duties imposed under the executive order to ensure the efficacy of this action." End quote. As veteran China analyst Bill Bishop expressed on this point today, quote, "The question now is whether Trump will ignore the retaliation he warned against and move to talks with Xi to try to both at least delay a worsening of the trade tensions and agree on a visit to the PRC to talks with Xi, or if he sees the PRC response as a challenge that he needs to respond to by increasing or expanding in scope the duties just announced. The consensus seems to be that Trump will pause and try to work with Xi on a bigger deal, but Xi just calls his bluff, and so he may be sensitive to any appearance of weakness." End quote. The coming days and weeks will be crucial in determining whether this trade war escalates further or finds a path toward de-escalation. We will continue following this story closely as it develops. Next up, we have 2 more developments to cover. But just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode, I have a huge favor to ask. That is just to hit the like button, and if you've not done so already, subscribe. It is only 2 clicks of the mouse, but it's a tremendous help for me and the channel. It is the only way in which it can grow and be shown to new people, so I deeply appreciate it. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description. This channel relies primarily on subscriber support to keep going, so this is also a big help. Thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's diplomatic tour of Central America is bringing heightened scrutiny to China's growing influence in the region. During visits to Panama and El Salvador, Rubio underscored Washington's concerns over Beijing's economic and strategic foothold, particularly around the Panama Canal. In Panama, President José Raúl Mulino sought to diffuse tensions by pledging not to renew the company's participation in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Bloomberg, US-based Bloomberg, reports that Mulino's administration is also considering cancelling contracts held by Hutchison Ports PPC, a subsidiary of Hong Kong-based C.R. Hutchison Holdings, which operates key ports near the canal. While no official decision has been made, the deliberations signal Panama's cautious response to US pressure. Rubio made it clear that the US views China's presence in the Panama Canal Zone as a violation of the treaty concerning the permanent neutrality and operation of the Panama Canal. He warned that if the status quo remains unchanged, the US would take necessary measures to safeguard its rights under the treaty. China has so far offered a muted response, with its embassy in Panama remaining on holiday. It is, of course, just finishing Chinese New Year. However, the Chinese ambassador to Panama published an op-ed titled, "America, Please Learn to Respect," criticizing US actions as undue interference. In El Salvador, Rubio's discussion with the president focused on countering Chinese influence across the region. Washington has long viewed Beijing's economic ties in Latin America as a strategic challenge. The Biden administration had previously expressed concerns about China's investment in Salvadoran infrastructure projects. As Rubio continues his regional tour, tensions between Washington and Beijing over Latin America's geopolitical alignment are set to escalate, with the Panama Canal emerging as a key flashpoint. Next up, let's jump from Latin America to the South China Sea to end today's video. In a significant display of military cooperation, the United States and the Philippines conducted joint air patrols over the South China Sea on the 4th of February. That is yesterday, Tuesday. This operation, which included 2 Philippine FA-50 fighter jets and 2 US B-1B bombers, saw flights over the contested Scarborough Shoal, also known as the Huangyan Dao in Chinese, a key maritime feature feature controlled by China but claimed by both the PRC and the Philippines. According to a Philippine Air Force spokesperson, the exercises are part of routine military training and are not targeted at any specific geopolitical issue. However, the timing and scale of the patrols send a strong message about the deepening US-Philippines alliance amid rising regional tensions between the latter and China. China swiftly responded with its own military maneuvers. The People's Liberation Army Air Force conducted a simultaneous patrol over this airspace, emphasizing its commitment to securing what it claims as sovereign territory. A PLA Southern Theater spokesperson accused the Philippines of working with, quote, outside forces to undermine regional peace and stability, end quote. This joint patrol comes 2 weeks into the Trump administration, marking an early and assertive U.S. foreign policy stance in the Indo-Pacific. The operation reaffirms Washington's commitment to its treaty ally, the Philippines, and signals deterrence against potential Chinese encroachment in the region as the Philippines and Washington see it. The South China Sea remains a flashpoint of geopolitical tension, perhaps after Taiwan, the most dangerous in the world, with multiple nations laying overlapping claims to key maritime features. Scarborough Shoal, in particular, has been a long-standing source of friction between Manila and Beijing. As both nations continue military activities in the area, observers will closely monitor whether these developments lead to further escalations or renewed diplomatic engagements in the disputed waters. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Wednesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.